So we're talking about new Netflix production, 1983. It's kind of a big deal. It's their first production specifically for the Polish market. It just came online. All 8 episodes came online a couple of days ago on Friday. We're going to talk about the first 3 episodes. The usual warning, spoilers ahead. And so if you haven't watched it, well, you know what spoilers means. Okay, let's jump in here. Guys, give us the basic premise, the idea behind 1983.
Well, the premise actually comes from the name. In 1983, Poland was, of course, in our reality, fighting for to overthrow the communist regime. You had Solidarność, you had a lot of political movements, and things progressed in a way that, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, Poland became a free country again with a non-one-party system. But in this reality, in 1983, there was a terrorist attack. As viewers, we don't exactly know who did it, how they did it, what happened, but these events changed history. And the TV show is actually taking place in 2003, so 20 years after these attacks, and communism has not fallen in Poland. You still have a one-party state. The Soviet Union has not fallen apart. It's basically a dystopian future where you're walking around Warsaw and it's kind of Orwellian in structure and in appearance. Actually, and they mention that, they kind of suggest that all the time with like 1984 being an illegal book, which you see a lot of people reading here and there in this TV show.
One of the few utterly heavy-handed notes in the first few episodes.
That was a bit kind of like,
look, it's symbolic.
Yeah, so far it sounds like
a work of fiction?
It sounds like your standard alternate history program.
Before we go any further, can we just discuss why the fuck 1984 always is held up as any example? I mean, it is a piece of fiction, by the way. You know,
it's a
you would
shorthand for totalitarianism, etc., etc.
But does it not actually just show how totalitarianism, in 1984, basically, we're looking at a situation where the totalitarian system is laid down in dystopian blueprint that's been used ever since in fiction. You would think any fiction that draws upon it would be anxious to hide that influence and not stick it in your face at the nearest opportunity.
I think here the showrunners, whoever came, actually just wanted to show how things would actually go in that direction, that what Orwell was like warning us about.
It seems like such an obvious point, though. Like, you just literally, anyone puts up an extra camera outside a shopping centre, 1984 gets referenced. It's been done to death.
But it's basically you want all the high school students and the college students thinking they're smart because, oh yeah, I read 1984, so I get this.
Okay, we're getting into we're getting into deep water here. Let's go back. Episode 1, first impressions. What do you think right off the bat?
There's a lot of traps you can fall into when you make a TV show like this, and I believe the team that have put this together have fallen into very few of them. 1984 being read from literally.
So you think it's original? You think it's original?
Collection aside. Yeah, no, I don't think it's original. That's not what I said. Twisting my words already. Shame on you.
Twisting your melon.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? When you do a dystopian future, obviously the viewer is looking at it going, I have questions. How did this happen? Is this realistic? Is this scenario plausible? The filmmaker can do a lot of things. They can do a lot of showing, which is what normally happens, and that can be clumsy exposition. You know, oh, this is how we arrived at such a sinister state of events.
A narrator in the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. Or, some rich old guy who's wistfully looking out a window, which symbolises him looking back on past events. He's drinking a whiskey.
Sorry, can I interrupt you? Can I point out, you guys have been talking about the show for a minute, and the listeners still have no fucking idea what happens in the first episode.
I'm about to stumble around to that eventually.
Jesus Christ, would you get to the point?
The point I'm trying to get to is, before we talk about the actual plot, we should talk about the most important element of an alternate history while you watch it, do you believe it? And in this case, I think she's done a brilliant job, Agnieszka Holland, because all the clues are visual, all the tells are there. It's 2003. It's a weirdly modern version of 2003 if Poland was a continuing communist state.
Like technology-wise, you mean?
That's exactly. That's the first question you're asking yourself. Why are the computers in the cop station so slick?
And they're all using what look like smartphones, kind of.
But they don't instantly try and explain it, which is great, yeah? So then they're also trying to subtly program you to see that the Polish Soviet state apparatus is still in play. They use uniforms to do that very cleverly.
The party's still in charge,
Exactly. And it's done subtly. It's not over the top. It's not beating you around the face like, say, The Man in the High Castle, where every 5 minutes there's a Nazi banner at least 68 feet high hanging off something, and you get a long lingering camera shot going. You do realise the Nazis won the war, right?
Okay, now can we get to what happens in the episode?
Okay, we're introduced to some of the first major characters, one of them being Kajetan, a young man in his mid-20s. We see him getting his law degree done, defending his dissertation. And his professor asks him some weird questions. We all of a sudden see during this dissertation that his professor and him have a special relationship, but all of a sudden the professor kind of goes off script and asks him like, well, what about the truth? Have you noticed that like the paradox in our legal system? You know, you're not supposed to question a party. You're not supposed to question a party, the legal system in a dystopian kind of future society. But this professor kind of asks a weird question. But
if men are fallible, how can the system they set up be infallible?
Exactly. Thank you for
which really twists his melon.
Yeah,
it's deep.
So this kid gets freaked out, but he still gets passed. He gets his dissertation, and his professor asks him over for dinner that evening because it's one of his favorite students. And during that dinner, the professor starts asking weird questions like, do you know how your parents died? Because what we have to also know about Cayetan is his parents died during the terrorist attacks in 1983. And this kid has been basically raised by the state and given all accessibility to everything possible. And he's been shown as like the perfect child because he actually was caught on film holding a lily during the funeral. And he's a symbol for the suffering that happened in 1983 that the government then used to continue the authoritarian regime.
And he's a true believer in the system.
That's the way they're presenting him. It's like he's been raised by the system, the ideology. And the professor's like, what do you really know?
And at the same time, then, just to introduce the main plot strand, which is Anatol Zianov's investigation, starts off with a suicide. He's an apparent suicide.
Apparent suicide, yes, because he also mentions like, oh, it's another young suicide. And just to mention, reiterate the fact that this is a dystopian society, somebody says like, oh, it's another young person because they have nothing to live for. Because everybody seems to know that this system sucks, but nobody wants to actually fight it.
But there is a contradiction that the system seems to have produced a reasonable amount of prosperity, and it hasn't been what you might call an alternate history of this is what would happen if the disaster of communism kept flowing and going and going. And they leave a lot of those questions lingering, which is kind of cool, and I'm assuming they're going to be resolved in later episodes.
Well, I hope so, because to be honest, this is one of the weak points for me is like life seems too good considering the way the things were really going in the 80s.
But look, it's basically, it starts around this case. It's a detective show, basically. A detective, Anatol Yanov, shows up. Now, can you just say this guy's name, please, Robert?
I know the actor. I don't know his last name.
Vienskiewicz.
That's the one. A fantastic actor. First of all, if you're going to have a dystopian cop drama, everything depends on that man's face, and he's got one of them faces that was just made for dystopia. This face, I'm thinking Stellan Skarsgård. The handsome Skarsgård's father. He's a revelation. This guy. Look, I haven't seen Claria, which I believe he's in, and I believe he's in every Polish movie. This guy, he's like the king of Polish cinema. I have to admit my ignorance here. I've only seen him in what was the thing I'm thinking of.
Dwoog.
That's it. Yes.
Oh, that was a depressing movie.
Yeah, that's an old movie. And he's great in that too, by the way. But this is a bravura performance. The amount of tense face acting this man is asked to do, he's really carrying the piece.
You can tell he's constipated. I mean, it goes through the screen right there.
He also gets beaten up in episode 2 in a way that I can only describe as beautiful. Like, nobody does spitting out the blood, beating up face like this guy.
Good bit of violence there. Yeah, it was very nice.
Episode 2 is excellent.
But he definitely plays the role of that cop that, doesn't play by the rules because he wants to get to the truth, kind of.
Yeah, that's what stood out to me in the first episode.
Yeah. So we should finish the cliche. We should finish the plot build up here because you asked us to A, keep it short, and B, explain a really complicated plot setup.
Well, did you think in the first episode they introduced a couple of too many characters? That was my impression.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, possibly it was a bit hard to follow, but I like that. I like being immersed straight away because what that's doing is it's showing and not telling. It's throwing you in there. It's respecting your intelligence. It's saying figure it out. We're not going to have, as I said, the cackling evil baddie with the glass of whiskey explaining everything every 10 minutes.
Bond villain. Yeah,
exactly.
Josh,
instead of that, we get our intelligence respected right from the start.
Well, also, I think Netflix are very wise to the fact that television has totally changed. It's not like this is my must-watch show. I must be at home, watch it. We had VCRs so we could record things, watch things later. Now, if people have and I think we're all guilty of this, if you have a favourite series, you watch it,
Bingers.
you rewatch it.
Yeah.
You will go back to those first episodes and like knowing how the whole story pans out, and then enjoy seeing how the characters are initially placed. So I don't think I'm not particularly critical of that.
So we've got two main strands: the lost student orphan, who's pursuing the truth through the clue given to him by his legal professor, who's wonderful in it, by the way. The old guy who gets killed off.
Yeah, he's very good.
Spoiler. And then we've got the investigation by Inspector Yanov, who has, you see clearly, questioned things back in 1983. His career was completely ruined over, and he's only recently been rehabilitated enough to even just take the most basic case in the militia, which is what the police was called here before. It was called the police.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Which is a cool name, militia. I love all of the interiors in the militia buildings. They have absolutely nailed 2003 through a slightly futuristic lens. I really enjoy the way it's put together.
It's all concrete and glass, basically.
Yeah, but it's the little details, the
very
touches.
little lighting.
Yeah, no. I would say it's well done. The interiors, the coffering is always a beautiful touch. Every building. There's one scene where they walk into the entrance of a lobby in a government building, and it's floor to ceiling copper letterboxes, and it just looks amazing. Like, I mean, I think it's actually, I'm really enjoying it, I have to say. So far,
me too,
for me.
I think there's one little weak spot for me with the quote unquote the resistance. They actually have a base.
The Light Brigade.
Yes,
Yeah, the base in the stadium, the old
Yeah,
stadium.
it's like way too much Star Wars, like the Rebellion. They actually have a physical place with computers hooked up in like lockers where they hold their
And
clothes.
this resistance is a little too young,
Lots of
a little too
sinister-looking server
photogenic
stacks.
for
They
my
all look
taste.
good. They're all in their
Exactly.
mid-20s
They're all
and they're
models.
experienced.
And kind of like, and they're tied in with the kind of Vietnamese and I think
They haven't really explained that yet. We've watched 3 episodes.
This is going to be interesting because I have the feeling. I mean, yes, there is a number of Vietnamese that live in Poland, real Poland now.
It's the largest majority
But
and minority in Poland.
this is a different scenario. I think I think the implication is that there's vastly more of them.
Yeah,
And isn't there a lot of clever twists like that as well? Not to make too many spoilers, but by episode 3, anyone involved with basically the suicide case turns out to be a thread that Inspector Yanov pulls on and starts revealing things about 1983. And at the same time, the young law student is finding out, he finds a picture that has a lot of the main protagonists who then ended up being in major government positions and who start dying off then. Even as early as episode 2, they start getting mysteriously killed and murdered.
Well, the professor is one who's died.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
In the first episode.
Yeah, straight after he reveals to his student that he should possibly look at this intriguing case.
if you know what I mean.
If you know what I mean.
You did have I mean, I really had the feeling as soon as he was handing over photographs and information, sort of like, I want you to have this as a keepsake. And I thought, well, he's not going to wake up for breakfast tomorrow.
I want you to have these crime scene photos as a keepsake.
Yes.
This is my only bum mode, the kid, Kayetan or whatever, Machak Mushao. There's a scene in episode 2 where he lays all the pictures and the files out on the floor and he stares at them intently and does his I'm figuring shit out.
You almost expect to have like a red string connecting things and everything.
And I'm completely taken out of it because I'm not sure this guy is anywhere near as good of an actor as his co-stars. It's such a strong cast. I think he's been thrown a sticky wicket to
There are a lot of cliches, a lot of tropes. But yeah, you say it's a strong cast, and it is, and I agree. And that's one thing that I was
tropes
kind of
is the
looking
ultimate film review wanker word. You know that?
It's a good word, though.
Tropes.
Devices. But you talk about the cast. I've always thought that Polish films and Polish television as well, they always have very, very good supporting character actors. And I've always had the impression that a lot of lead actors and actresses, they overact. They're from the theater school, like they're acting on stage for the person sitting in the last row, and they're overacted. They emote too much, but they haven't seen that so far in 1983. I think
Anatol
very good. It's very
pitching his performance beautifully so far.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing when it comes to tropes that I definitely noticed that makes me think of like 90s HBO boobs. They just seem to show up randomly at any given moment for no apparent reason that has to.
I'm having a shower now, completely incidental to the plot.
Yes,
and I'm looking a bit deep while I'm having this shower. There's my tits.
The producers read the script and they write a note that says, "Sorry guys, we need some more tits and ass to get this good." That's how it is. I'll
change my shirt now.
Like it or not. Yes. Yeah. Let me just change my shirt for no reason here. Oops, I forgot my bra. Yeah. There's a bit of that.
Well, we need a scene in a brothel. Why? We need a scene in a brothel.
Exactly. A couple other things stood out to me. I guess this is a cinematography thing. If you notice this weird blue filter that's on pretty much everything indoors, and too many scenes at night for unknown reasons.
It's trademark dystopian look, isn't it?
I guess it has to be that way. And also,
I have to say, I disagree slightly. I have noticed this in endless amounts of dramas. Game of Thrones being the absolute worst for this. Anytime they go into an interior, the contrast in your TV struggles because it's so dark. I didn't actually think the interiors in this are that dark at all. The exteriors, sure, they're trying to create a mood, but the interiors are well lit. They're trying to show off the set design, which is phenomenal. I think it's a masterclass in show and not tell this.
Am I missing something, or maybe this is deliberate or not? But all the scenes that are inside the ministry's offices, that, as you said earlier, very modern, very nice and clean. But when we see street scenes or the inside of apartments of regular people, it's still like the real 1983. You know, they're using Maluks and Polonaise cars on the street, and
slightly older models.
Is that just inconsistency in the set design, or is that?
We've only watched 3 episodes. I'm going to throw a prediction out. I think the company Ultra that spawns at Travalla, where they're going to the party in episode 3, I think the idea is that Poland has a national electronics industry that's actually catapulted the country up the rankings globally for wealth, etc.
Making a prediction.
I'm making a prediction, yeah. Also, we haven't really seen the influence of the Russian agents who are inevitably going to...
we just got a little sneak peek of them all.
Yeah, they're going to shuffle out of the shadows soon enough.
Okay,
I'm fascinated so far. 3 episodes in.
Let's wrap it up. After 3 episodes, what grade do you give it so far?
I'm giving it a 5 out of 5, and I'll tell you why. Because even though we've spent a lot of this talking about the set design, the tone, the classic things you talk about when you talk about a futuristic or dystopian TV show, what's really important to me is actually the story, the plot. And they've gotten that 100% right. I don't really care about the set design. What I really care about is Anatol. I want to know what he wants to know.
Mike, what's your grade?
Here, I have to agree with Anatoly. He's like the one character that I kind of give a rat's ass about. With everybody else, all the other characters seem a little flat. Still haven't been like...
Fuck, that guy can
presented.
act. Let me say that.
Yeah, and I think there's actually a very good chance that this is going to open up kind of a Polish perspective on stuff to a much, much wider audience. I think it's very accessible.
I'm going to be the odd man out. I'm going to say that I'm still not hooked and convinced. If it doesn't happen by episode 5, I don't think it's going to happen. But I think episode 3 is when you start to see the signs of those hooks coming in.
Yeah, and the end of episode 3 has a huge moment in it that is going to really catapult the plot forward. And may I just say, John, I hope someday we find something that replicates your love of the Lego Batman movie, because... It's
still my favorite movie ever, though.
It seems to be just a long road for any piece of art to top that for you. It really does.
He's crying right now. He's
criticizing what I do. All right, 1983 on Netflix. You know where to find it. Next week we'll wrap it up with our review of the whole thing, all the way up to episode 8. See you next time on the KrakCast.
More boobs.